Our Father, who art in heaven, as a body we congregate in this council chambers for the betterment of our fellow citizens, lead us that we may do all things well. Amen. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Mr. DeBerge?
Present.
Mr. Brickway?
Here.
Ms. Hausfeld?
Here.
Mr. Bob Culbertson?
Here.
Ms. Bettinghouse?
Here.
Mr. Ray Culbertson?
Here.
And Mr. Schildmeyer.
Present.
Let the record show all 7 members are present. Members of council, what is your pleasure on the reading of the last minutes?
Mr. President,
Ms. Bettinghouse.
I make a motion to dispense with the reading of the last written minutes.
I'll second that, Mr. President.
Motion by Ms. Bettinghouse, seconded by Ms. Hausfeld to dispense with the reading of the last minutes. Are there any remarks? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So ordered. Members of council, are there any errors or corrections to the minutes as submitted? If not, the minutes will stand as submitted. Move to reports of city officials. Mayor, Mr. Stuchel.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just to give you all an update, the CIC has a fully executed purchase agreement with Civitas Development Group for the redevelopment of St. Bernard Square. This is a very exciting news for the village, and we'll update everyone as the process moves forward. I just want to make sure that this does not mean that you will see immediate demolition of the shopping center. This process still will take some time, but we, again, will keep you all updated. The St. Bernard German Luau is coming up this next weekend, Friday, August 5th from 5 p.m. to midnight, and Saturday, 3 p.m. to midnight. The Fresh Market will be held on Saturday from 12 to 3 p.m. Please check the village website for the complete list of events. I am asking that the members of council, administration, department heads, and village employees to consider signing up for the Celebrity Dunk Booth. I will be emailing everyone a link for the sign-up genius for you to commit to a 30-minute stint in the booth. Proceeds from the dunk booth will go to help with the construction of a water collection shelter to be built at the community garden. I have signed up for both days, so please bring your cash and see how many times you can dunk me. Again, I am asking that you please table ordinance number 20 so that we can allow for the proper community engagement process and surveying of the community for the proposed charter amendments. We'll be targeting this fall for this process under the guidance of our consultant. I'm also asking that you please support ordinance number 22, which is the MOU with the St. Bernard Service Department Association, which allows for the compression of the previous 8-step process for the position of labor to that of a 5-step process. Also, Valerie will be discussing further ordinance number 23. Thank you, and that concludes my report.
Thank you. Is there a report from the auditor? Nope. Director of Law, Ms. Van Valkenburg.
Thank you. Just want to remind you that ordinance number 15 is coming up for its second reading tonight, and I'd like to ask you to continue in your support of that. Now, turning to ordinance number 23, which you have before you, which is authorizing the mayor to enter into an agreement with Roger Bacon High School. There was a question that arose about whether or not this had to go out for bidding. We are not signing the contract with the construction company. The Roger Bacon High School is doing that. I have found case law which discusses the terms under which a city or a municipal subdivision can make a particular expenditure for a public purpose. That is outlined, I've quoted that and I've outlined it within the ordinance, but I think we were well within our abilities to make a payment to Roger Bacon, who is, after, as I said, going to be the one on the contract, but it's for the purposes of public improvements which should positively impact the people of St. Bernard. So ask that you support and pass ordinance number 23. Thank you. That concludes my report.
Thank you. Treasurer, Safety and Service Director, Mr. Paul.
Thank you, Mr. President. The slide will be started on Monday, August the 1st. The pool will remain open and just that section will be roped off. It will take 4 days to complete. Water will be turned on for the slide on Saturday, August the 6th. To my community, I don't think I have taken time to write about time. It was thought of a long time ago. However, someone realized that it was time for the sun to go down, then come up again. What time is it? Daytime? Well, what time is it now? Nighttime. Of course, over the passage of time, we became timelier and precision set upon us. 1 minute until countdown. It dawned on us that we were only here for a short time. It should have taught us that we needed to use our time wisely, make every moment count, so do so quickly before your time runs out on you and you regret wasting your time. That concludes my report.
Thank you. Tax Administrator, Ms. Helms.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a quick recap on June's tax collections. $1,911,880. The tax refunds for June were $11,399. Delinquent tax collected with capital recovery was $2,697. Delinquent tax collected with the Ohio Attorney General's Office was $4,969. And taxes paid through the e-file portal were $418. That concludes my report.
Thank you. Move to reports of standing committees. Finance, Mr. Taberski.
Thank you, Mr. President. Had a discussion with the police chief. We are canceling the August block watch meeting. Hopefully we'll have one in November. His workload is pretty high right now with the shortages down there, so he wants to postpone that till November.
Thank you. Safety, Mr. Brickwig.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have the monthly June report for the St. Bernard Fire Department. As far as fires go, fire incidents, structure fires 7, other fires 3, vehicle fires 0, auto accidents 4, hazmat incidents 0, service calls 4, fire alarms 14, CO alarms 0, EMS assist 14, for a total of 46. Then as far as fire mutual aid given, Norwood 1, Elmwood Place 4, Lockland 3, Reading 1, and Columbia Township 1. Fire mutual aid received, Norwood 2, Elmwood Place 1, Reading 3, Wyoming 3, Lockland 3, Springfield Township 2, Cincinnati 1. As far as EMS goes, EMS incidents, they had 60 transports, 56 non-transports for a total of 116 EMS runs. Mutual aid under EMS, Elmwood received 1, Norwood 5, and Cincinnati 1. Elmwood Place contract incidents 10 for the month of June. The fire department has had rope rescue training completed and prioritized the search and training completed. That concludes my report, Mr. President.
Thank you. Service, Ms. Hausfeld.
Thank you, Mr. President. Tonight I have the Service Department report for June 2022. There were 40 trucks placed at residence, 36 dumpsters placed at residence, 130 special pickups at residence, 218.33 tons of garbage taken to the landfill. As far as recycling report, there's 28.95 tons of recycling material, 232 pounds of scrap aluminum, 13 pounds of brass, 12 pounds of copper, 10,540 pounds of scrap metal, 59 pounds of electric motors. There's also the waste collection fees collected for the month of May 2022 was $29,490.20. That concludes my report, Mr. President.
Thank you. Public improvements, Mr. Bob Culbertson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have no report this month, or this council meeting. Thanks.
Thank you. Laws, contracts, and claims, Ms. Bettinghouse.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have no report.
Thank you. Marketing, Mr. Ray Culbertson.
Thanks, Mr. President. I do have a report. Please mark your calendars for the following events. Starting on August 6th, the Aquatic Center will be open on weekends only from 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. through Labor Day. Saturday, August 13th, will be a family night at the pool, again at the Aquatic Center from 6 p.m. to 11 p.m. On Saturday, August 27th, there will be an adult night at the Aquatic Center from 6 p.m. to 11 p.m. And finally, on Monday, September 5th, there will be a dog swim at the Aquatic Center from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. And that will mark the closing of the Aquatic Center for this season. That concludes my report.
Thank you. Business and industry, Mr. Schultmeyer.
Thank you, Mr. President. I've got an announcement for those of you looking for a place to shred your documents. AARP is sponsoring Shred Days. They're not in St. Bernard yet, but in Forest Park, there's going to be one on August 20th from 9 a.m. to noon. On September 17th, Oakley Crossroads is going to have one from 9 a.m. to noon, and then there'll be another one in Oakley, I guess at a location to be determined, on October 15th. If you'd like to register to receive location, select time slots, you can go to aarp.org/Cincinnati, and you can register whether you're a AARP member or not. That concludes my report.
Thank you. Committee of the Whole, Ms. Stegman.
Thank you, Mr. President. Last minutes were submitted on 7/26, and I have no communications.
All right, thank you very much. At this time, we'll move to ordinances. Clerk, will you please give the first reading of ordinance number 15, 2022?
Ordinance number 15, 2022, authorizing and directing the mayor to execute the amendments to the VIBA Trust and VIBA Plan for the purpose of amending the plan coverage to current employees and declaring an emergency.
Members of council, you've heard the first reading of ordinance number 15, 2022. What is your pleasure?
Mr. President,
Ms. Bettinghouse?
I make a motion that ordinance number 15, 2022 take its regular course.
I'll second that.
A motion by Ms. Bettinghouse, seconded by Mr. Bob Culbertson to go regular course. Are there any remarks? If not, is there anyone in the audience wishing to address council on ordinance 15? If not, clerk, will you call the roll on the motion to go regular course?
Mr. Jaberke?
Aye.
Mr. Rickwag?
Aye.
Ms. Hausfeld?
Aye.
Mr. Bob Culbertson?
Aye.
Ms. Bettinghouse?
Aye.
Mr. Ray Culbertson?
Abstain.
And Mr. Schildmeyer.
Aye.
6 ayes, no nays, 1 abstention. Ordinance number 15, 2022 will take its regular course. Clerk, will you please give the second reading of ordinance number 20, 2022?
Ordinance number 20, 2022, an ordinance submitting to the electors of St. Bernard certain amendments to the charter and declaring an emergency.
Members of council, you've heard the second reading of ordinance number 20, 2022. What is your pleasure?
Mr. President,
Ms. Bettinghouse?
I make a motion to table ordinance number 2022.
I'll second that.
A motion by Ms. Bettinghouse, seconded by Mr. Ray Culbertson to table ordinance 20, 2022. Did I say Ray? Sorry. You two are interchangeable, aren't you? Mr. Bob Culbertson, sorry. Are there any remarks? If not, clerk, will you please take the roll on the motion to table?
Mr. Jaberke?
Aye.
Mr. Rickwag?
Aye.
Ms. Hausfeld?
Aye.
Mr. Bob Culbertson?
Aye.
Ms. Bettinghouse?
Aye.
Mr. Ray Culbertson?
Aye.
And Mr. Schildmeyer.
Aye.
7 ayes, no nays. Motion carries. Ordinance number 20, 2022 is tabled. Clerk, will you please give the first reading of ordinance number 21, 2022?
Ordinance number 21, 2022, authorizing and directing the auditor to provide additional appropriations and declaring an emergency.
Members of council, you have heard the first reading of ordinance number 21, 2022. What is your pleasure?
Mr. President,
Ms. Bettinghouse?
I make a motion to suspend with the second and third reading of ordinance number 21, 2022.
I'll second that, Mr. President.
A motion by Ms. Bettinghouse, seconded by Ms. Hausfeld to suspend with the second and third reading of ordinance 21, 2022. Are there any remarks? Not, is there anyone in the audience wishing to address council on ordinance 21? Not, clerk, will you please call the roll on suspension?
Mr. Jaberke?
Aye.
Mr. Rickwag?
Aye.
Ms. Hausfeld?
Aye.
Mr. Bob Culbertson?
Aye.
Ms. Bettinghouse?
Aye.
Mr. Ray Culbertson?
Aye.
And Mr. Schildmeyer.
7 ayes, no nays. Motion to suspend carries. Members of council, what is your pleasure on adoption?
Mr. President,
Ms. Bettinghouse?
make a motion to adopt ordinance number 21, 2022.
Second it.
Motion by Ms. Bettinghouse, seconded by Mr. Ray Culbertson to adopt ordinance 21, 2022. Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Jaberke?
Aye.
Mr. Rickwag?
Aye.
Ms. Hausfeld?
Aye.
Mr. Bob Culbertson?
Aye.
Ms. Bettinghouse?
Aye.
Mr. Ray Culbertson?
Aye.
And Mr. Schildmeyer.
7 ayes, no nays. Motion carries. Ordinance number 21, 2022 is adopted as read. Clerk, will you please give the first reading of ordinance number 22, 2022?
Ordinance number 22, 2022, an ordinance approving the memorandum of understanding between the Village of St. Bernard, Ohio, and St. Bernard Service Department Association and declaring an emergency.
Members of council, you've heard the first reading of ordinance number 22, 2022. What is your pleasure?
Mr. President,
Ms. Bettinghouse?
I make a motion to suspend with the second and third reading of ordinance number 22, 2022.
I'll second that, Mr. President.
Motion by Ms. Bettinghouse, second by Ms. Housefeld to suspend with the second and third reading of ordinance 22. Are there any remarks? Not, is there anyone in the audience wishing to address council on ordinance 22? If not, clerk, will you please call the roll on suspension?
Mr. Taberky?
Aye.
Mr. Brickwig?
Aye.
Ms. Housefeld?
Aye.
Mr. Bob Culbertson?
Aye.
Ms. Bettinghouse?
Aye.
Mr. Ray Culbertson?
Aye.
And Mr. Schildmeyer.
7 ayes, no nays. Motion to suspend carries. Members of council, what is your pleasure on adoption?
Mr. President,
Ms. Bettinghouse?
I make a motion to adopt ordinance number 22, 2022.
I'll second that, Mr. President.
Motion by Ms. Bettinghouse, second by Ms. Housefeld to adopt ordinance 22, 2022. Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Taberky?
Aye.
Mr. Brickwig?
Aye.
Ms. Housefeld?
Aye.
Mr. Bob Culbertson?
Aye.
Ms. Bettinghouse?
Aye.
Mr. Ray Culbertson?
Aye.
And Mr. Schildmeyer.
Aye.
7 ayes, no nays. Motion carries. Ordinance number 22, ordinance 22, 2022, like a mouthful, is adopted as read. All right, clerk, will you please give the first reading of ordinance 23, 2022?
Ordinance number 23, 2022, an ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into an agreement with Roger Bacon High School for construction of a crosswalk on Mitchell Avenue and declaring an emergency.
Members of council, you've heard the first reading of ordinance number 23, 2022. What is your pleasure?
Mr. President,
Ms. Bettinghouse?
make a motion to suspend with the second and third reading of ordinance number 23, 2022.
Second that, Mr. President.
A motion by Ms. Bettinghouse, second by Ms. Housefeld to suspend with the second and third reading of ordinance 23, 2022. Are there any remarks? Not, is there anyone in the audience wishing to address council on ordinance 23? Not, clerk, will you please call the motion on suspension?
Mr. Taberky? Mr. Brickwig?
Aye.
Ms. Housefeld?
Aye.
Mr. Bob Culbertson?
Aye.
Ms. Bettinghouse?
Aye.
Mr. Ray Culbertson?
Aye.
And Mr. Schildmeyer.
Aye.
7 ayes, no nays. Motion carries. Members of council, what is your pleasure on adoption?
Mr. President,
Ms. Bettinghouse?
I make a motion to adopt ordinance number 23, 2022.
I'll second that, Mr. President.
A motion by Ms. Bettinghouse, second by Ms. Housefeld to adopt ordinance 23, 2022. Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Taberky?
Aye.
Mr. Brickwig?
Aye.
Ms. Housefeld?
Aye.
Mr. Bob Culbertson?
Aye.
Ms. Bettinghouse?
Aye.
Mr. Ray Culbertson?
Aye.
And Mr. Schildmeyer.
Aye.
7 ayes, no nays. Motion carries. Ordinance 23, 2022 is adopted as read. All right. This time, does anyone on council have anything under old business?
Mr. President,
Mr. Taberky?
Tommy, can we have Heidi put that information for the shred days on the website, please? Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else on council?
Mr. President,
Mr. Bob Culbertson?
Tommy, the garbage fee that we put in a couple years ago, I know we had to sign an agreement for like collection. Is that coming up this year or is that next year? Was that a
Yeah.
5-year deal?
Yeah, Mr. President, it's a 5-year contract.
So next year?
Yes.
Okay.
Anyone else under old business? Does anyone on council have anything under new business? If not, is there anyone in the audience wishing to address council this evening? If not, then the next committee of the whole will be Thursday, August 11th at 7 p.m. This time I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Mr. Ray Culbertson.
Make a motion, we adjourn.
I'll second that, Mr. President.
Motion by Mr. Ray Culbertson, second by Ms. Housefeld to adjourn. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? We are adjourned.